All right. Hi and welcome everybody. There should still be a few more people joining and hopefully they will still be able to join as we kick off, but we'll also share the recording afterwards. So just a big welcome to everyone. And thanks for joining us for part 3 of our Regen Ag webinar series. This one is all about soil biology. And it's the very first series we've been running, or webinar series we've been running as a bit of a trial. So thanks for joining us. Any feedback will be very welcome. My name is Inga Locke and I am COO at Grounded. On the agenda for today is a brief introduction to Grounded, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Daniel Fourie, who you'll see pictured probably to your right. Daniel is our Regen Ag enthusiast. He is a self-declared soil nerd, possibly more than self-declared, but a self-declared soil nerd, and he's got significant expertise in soil microbiology and composting. And then he will be speaking to us about soil biology. So just before we kick off with Grounded, for those who missed the first two webinars in our series, the series has been all about the 3 tenets of healthy soils. In the first one, we looked at soil structure, which is obviously the most visible component of soil fertility. In the second, we looked at soil chemistry and the nutrients vital to feeding it. And finally, we're now going to explore soil biology, which is really the engine behind it all. You can find the links to those previous webinars on LinkedIn, but I will also share it along with a follow-up email with a link to this recording after this webinar. A bit of housekeeping, if you have any questions or discussion points, please feel free to add them to the chat and we'll pick those up at the end. Cool. Without further ado, moving on to the first agenda item, which is a quick intro to Grounded, and then I will hand over to my colleague Daniel. So Grounded's team is, you can see them pictured here. We've got a team of people in South Africa, which is where our main base is, Zambia, Tanzania, and the Netherlands. And what we do is we give regenerative agriculture support to farmers in Africa and really help them transition to Regen Ag. So we build companies that process and sell produce from those farmers. Daniel, if you could just skip to the next slide. Thank you. And that produce ranges from essential oils, herbal tea, spices, etc. And then we try and sell those at really the best possible prices in both local and international markets. So try and access those premium markets. We have built 3 companies doing this from scratch. An essential oils one in the Baviaanskloof, herbal tea, vegetables, and a recent joint venture in Tanzania. And then we have also recently launched a project called Grounded Ingredients, and really identified that it was very difficult to sell many of these ingredients at a premium. And Grounded Ingredients is really a wholesale platform for brands looking to source regenerative ingredients directly from farmers. Sorry, Daniel, if you can skip to the next slide. And we did Grounded Ingredients does this in 2 ways. One through through an online web shop, and then also through actual sourcing partnerships where we take over the sourcing for ethical brands who want to source a whole range of different regenerative ingredients. That is a very brief introduction about Grounded. If you would like more information, please visit our websites, grounded.co.za and groundedingredients.com. I will now hand over to the reason why you are all here, and that is to Daniel to speak to us about soil biology. Over to you.
Thanks, Inga. And yeah, like Inga says, I am a soil nerd, and my favorite part of soil is actually the microbiology, or the life within the soil. So it's very nice to be able to chat to you guys about that today. I'm also, in light of more recent events, i.e. wars in the north and so on, causing the oil industry to go completely nuts and make fertilizer prices unbelievably high, and obviously putting a lot of pressure on farmers all around the world. I'm going to focus this webinar a lot on more on practical the practical aspects of regenerative agriculture and what you can do to apply these practices to reduce your input costs. Because actually earlier this week, I was asked by an agricultural economist, what is the 5-year aim if he was modeling a farm system for me, and he asked me, what's the 5-year aim with implementing this regenerative agriculture? Are you looking for some kind of a yield increase? And it's actually, the benefit should come from decreasing your costs and decreasing your inputs. Regenerative agriculture is not about increasing your yields, but rather about decreasing your costs and your inputs and increasing your profitability across the board. So today I'll go into some of these simple techniques that you can use to empower and support the little workers who are in your soil, so that they can do the work for you, so that you don't have to put a lot of energy into growing crops. So like I mentioned, I'll have a quick overview of soil biology, but I promise it's not going to be a lecture on microbiology today. It will be high level. Then go through quite a few of these practical regenerative tools, and some practical examples, and then just talk about how one can bring it all together from a farmer's perspective, how you should go about actually implementing a regenerative system, or creating a regenerative system, and pull all these tools together to make a holistic plan for your farm, and then transition fully towards regenerative farming. So just in brief, the soil food web is a model that comes from the USDA, work done in the 1980s by Dr. Elaine Ingham, amongst others. Many great soil biologists since then as well have contributed. But it's a system or a model that shows the interactions of soil biology in the ground, and how energy is transferred through these different levels. They call it trophic levels in the soil. So the first and most important part of biology in the soil is actually the plant. Plants, their roots, half of that plant is inside the soil, and that accounts for 50% of so 50% of the plant makes up soil biology in the ground. Plants are the origin of energy in the soil. So like the sun is the origin of energy for Earth, plants are that origin of energy for the soil, and they provide the building blocks. And then on top of that, you get the soil microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, arthropods, protozoa. These organisms, the bacteria and the fungi are primary decomposers. So they take that energy from the plant, either the dead organic material or sugars directly from the plants. And they start to transmute that material into more usable forms, into biologically active forms. So proteins, fats, sugars. And then the next level up is the predatory organisms like arthropods, nematodes, and protozoa. They will feed on the fungi and the bacteria, and some of them even attack plants, some plant parasitic nematodes and arthropods. And then the next level up is obviously you start getting bigger and bigger organisms, proper arthropods, insects, earthworms, those types of things, until you leave the soil again, and then you've got larger organisms, mammals and birds and so on, that will feed on these organisms. So together, soil biology is a movement of energy through the soil. Like I said, it transmutes that energy, comes in through the plants, and then it changes as it goes through the soil organisms. And it creates, altogether, these soil organisms create an ecological function for the soil, and it allows soil to support plants again at the end of the day. So it's a closed system, or not a closed system, but it's a cyclical system that's responsible for recycling nutrients and carbon within the soil. So, in brief, that covers soil biology. Like I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the microorganisms and their classifications and their exact functions, but I'm going to go jump now into some practical tools that you can use as a regenerative farmer, or as a farmer who wants to move to a regenerative system. And I'll try and, in my opinion, all regenerative practices are effective because at the root of, or the effect that they all have, is to preserve or support soil microorganisms. And like I said, the soil microorganisms are the guys that are going to do the work for you. And it's important to keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, you could get to a system where your soil microorganisms and the system around them is so strong that you don't have to do anything to your soil anymore. You don't have to put inputs in anymore. They can be self-sustaining, like you get in nature. You know, the Amazon rainforest has never had someone come around and fertilize it, or nature can self-sustain itself. It's a cyclical system, so you can reach that stage, but you need to develop your system so that it can work like that. So the first step to doing that is to reduce your inputs. It's most farmers that I meet and I work with are putting down way more than what they need. Often the problem is that people don't test. They don't test what they need. They don't test their soils. And then they follow the advice of a salesperson, and the salesperson would like you to buy more stuff and spend more money with them. So they often encourage you to do exactly that. And so a lot of farmers are in a trap where they have to buy more inputs and put more inputs down, and they're working hard and not smart with the inputs. So they're just putting down way more than what they need, instead of putting down smaller quantities of exactly the right things. And the big problem with this is that chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, are all very destructive on soil biology. They're very concentrated ionic salts. So they salt, not like table salt, but very reactive chemicals that quickly dissolve in the soil solution. And that change in the soil's salt content damages the soil microorganisms and kills a large portion of them. And obviously they do recover, but it puts them back. And each time that you add fertilizer, you put them back more. The soil loses more of its natural function. So you have to put more fertilizer the next time. And then the next time you have to put more fertilizer again. So it's like a vicious cycle. The more you put down, the more you have to keep putting down. And it's like a drug addiction. And the best way to do it is to just stop, or not stop outright, but to reduce it and to start managing that addiction, because it just gets worse and worse and worse with time. So first step is just try and reduce your chemical inputs. And I know it's difficult to say that, and lots of farmers argue hard against me that you need to put down something. So the next step is to switch to lower impact fertilizers and inputs. So if you do feel that you really need to put something down, then try and put down something organic instead of chemical. And I must admit, started seeing it more since the fertilizer prices have gone up so much in the last few months. It's actually really difficult for me to find manure for my organic farmers because farmers are getting feeling the pinch, and now they're starting to use more manure-based fertility. So they're using their chicken manure and their cattle manure that they're generating. So manures is always a good option. And there are certain chemical fertilizers that are also okay to use in small amounts. And there you have to do a bit of research and so on. So anhydrous ammonia, for instance, is a terrible, terrible, terrible chemical fertilizer. It's literally like drain cleaner. It's got a lot of nitrogen in it, so it's very good at making plants grow. But it burns all the carbon and all the microorganisms out of your soil. But potassium nitrate, for instance, is a friendlier version of nitrogen fertilizer. Although often the cheap stuff is the more damaging stuff. So the slightly better chemical fertilizers are usually a bit more expensive. And that's why it's important to test and know exactly what you need, and then just put down what you need and put down the slightly better, less harmful chemicals. And then also, obviously, the organic stuff. There's a lot of organic materials that you can also change or make into your own fertilizers. So a great system is, there's this, in the East, it's called Korean natural farming. And the Koreans love fermenting stuff. And it's something that I've found to be super effective, is to actually ferment your own fertilizers. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's like making some sauerkraut or some kimchi for your plants, and they love it. They absolutely, absolutely love it, especially if you choose the right type of stuff like fish offal or something like that to make it from. So the other way to ensure fertility as you move away from chemicals is to recycle farm wastes. And composting, it's one of the most underrated forms of fertility. I mean, every single farm that I walk onto, there's heaps and heaps of organic matter lying around, and it's good nutrients. They're just not in a form that can be used yet. And composting has always been quite cost prohibitive for a lot of farmers. But I mean, if you look at the fertilizer prices now, the compost is actually, it's really worth it, just getting a compost turner, or just and there's lots of different ways to do composting that don't have to be so labor and cost intensive. And composting is a great source of fertility for your soil, because it's like a balanced meal. Instead of, you know, if I had to compare just using pure manures, it's like having some McDonald's or something like that, lower quality food that's quickly digestible, or some sugary snacks or something like that that's quickly digestible, versus compost, which is like a 3-course health meal at a vegan shop or something like that. It's got a lot of nutrients in. They're in different forms. They're complex nutrients. They're simple nutrients. And in general, it's just better for the health of your soil. You also bring in these good microorganisms, and there's a lot of carbon as well that you're bringing with when you put down compost. So you're feeding these microorganisms and you're storing that carbon in the soil as well. So yeah, I can say that, and do the research. There's a lot of new information out there about composting. The problem I've seen with the using compost is that very few farmers actually have access to good compost to use. So you should do the effort and find good compost and use the good stuff, because there's so much bad compost out there as well that it's worse than chemical fertilizers. I can tell you, if you're going to put some rotten stuff on your plants, then they're not going to love you for that. You need to use really good compost, stuff that you'd be willing to eat yourself, if I can put it that way. So Other practical step for regenerative farming is to create a supportive environment for microorganisms. Microbes eat carbon and they live in carbon. Soil organic matter and soil carbon is essential for microorganisms to thrive in your soil. And there, like I mentioned, you can use the compost. Compost is one of these sources of great carbon, but other more advanced methods like biochar and adding humic acid or humic substances is another way to put down very stable carbon into your soil that these microorganisms will be able to live inside of. And it just increases the microbes like that environment. They like these highly stable carbon compounds inside the soil. So it's definitely worth looking at getting some of these more stable carbon sources like biochar or humic substances and using them in your farm system as well. They also increase the storage capacity of your soil to store nutrients. So it's like investing long-term in the soil's total ability to hold nutrients as well. Then the next thing also got to do with those microbes and feeding them is to increase plant microbe interactions. So only a fairly, I'm going to say small, but a small portion of soil organisms eat dead stuff. We call it saprophytic organisms. They'll break down dead plant material. A large majority of soil microorganisms actually need living plants. They need a living plant that puts out root exudates as their source of food. And these soil microorganisms that form a beneficial relationship with your plants, you call them plant growth promoting microorganisms, PGPRs. They are the ones that you want in your soil, because they put together an exchange with the plants. The plants give them sugars. In exchange, these microorganisms will give them nutrients and water, and in a lot of cases, secondary metabolites. So even things like antibiotics or hormones or certain growth stimulators, they trade the plant the sugars for these compounds, and you get a very healthy exchange that goes on in the soil there. And for this reason, it's very important to try and have living organisms in your soil as much as possible, so that you can have that exchange going on in your soil. So to keep living plants year-round, to fill any dead spaces that you have between your crops. So if you've got perennial crops, plant a cover crop between them, try and increase the amount of ground cover that you have with living plants as much as possible, as these are essential to feed this microbial population. And it's unfortunately one of those things, it's the more you work on improving your soil biology, the more food you need to be giving these microorganisms, because you're growing that population. So you must carry on then feeding them. You must carry on with laying roots in the soil as much as possible, and try and reduce any fallow times or any times that you have to till. If you do have to till the plant directly after it, don't wait weeks and weeks and weeks before you plant again, so that you don't break that cycle, so you preserve those organisms inside your soil. Another tip, and something that a lot of farmers struggle with, a lot of farmers are commercial farmers these days are very single-minded on a certain crop that they focus on. So if they've got an orchard of apples, then they just want to farm apples, and they don't want to know anything else about anything else. Is not farming, it's just apples is farming. But that's not how nature works. Nature has many different elements to it, and livestock or animals is an important element that actually affects your soils very much. So animals have a very important function in your ecosystem. They come in, they create disturbance. So they come in, they break plants, they eat them, they leave their manure all over the place, and they also are like a taxi service for microorganisms. Because as they're going down and eating these plants, they pick up all these microorganisms, soil microorganisms in their saliva and around their faces, and then they go and put them down somewhere else when they go and chew over there. So they help to move soil microorganisms from one place to another, and so they inoculate as they go along, and their manure and their saliva and urine also do that. So bringing animals into your system is sort of it helps to close that loop. It helps to create that nutrient cycle, which I mentioned is so critically important to create the system that will become self-sustaining, that you don't need to continually put inputs into and take off from the other side. You can actually close that loop and use these animals to do that function. Obviously, you do have to be considerate about what crop you are farming. Some animals like sheep and lettuce won't mix, for instance. Sheep will eat all of it. But you can use a good rotation or something like that to bring them in at the right time. Then one of the last things is actually inoculating with beneficial microorganisms. It's something that I've often seen on a lot of commercial farms or farms that have, let's say, been farmed very conventionally. There's a huge amount of locked up fertility in the soil. And because they've been slowly but surely destroying their microbial population. And when you then bring in positive microorganisms, it's a very cheap way to quickly unlock that fertility in your soil and start that cycle. Now, it's fine to inoculate with microorganisms, but if you're not going to do all the other things to create the environment and create the structure in the soil and put the carbon into the soil and put the food into the soil, then it's not really going to help long term. Or you're going to have to be inoculating the whole time. So it's only something that I advise farmers to do once they've started doing all the other things to start building up that reserve of carbon and that environment in the soil. But then it can be very effective, and you can bring in, it's important to use a good quality, diverse compost that's got a huge diversity of microorganisms. You do get certain biostimulants or single strain microorganisms, a lot of those plant growth promoting microorganisms that I mentioned. You can buy them in a bottle these days where it's a single strain. But in my experience, they are effective only very short term, that they last in your soil. And it's something that you must take care with. It's an alien organism that you're bringing into a system. So you should just be careful about what types of biostimulants you use where and for what reason. I think it's something that can be easily abused as well. But a good quality compost from compost that's made on your farm or close by, out of your environment, is going to have a lot of the organisms around that are going to be in your soils in any case. So to make an extract from that compost is one of the cheapest ways to quickly inoculate your soil with all of this diversity of microorganisms. That's that in terms of tools. And I've gone over in general, what's important to do and what's not important to do. Obviously, it's very difficult to go into exact details about use these species of cover crops or use this kind of goat with in that kind of orchard. it's going to differ from farm system to farm system, the exact details of how you do it. So it was there. You need to just choose something. And a lot of farmers, that's the biggest barrier that they have to starting regenerative farming, is that taking that first step. A lot of farmers that I work with or talk to, they tend to overthink this regenerative agriculture thing. They think it's like something other than farming, and it's really not. Most of it is really old advice that existed before the chemical industry started taking off in the 1950s, 40s, 1950s. So we were farming like that for thousands of years up until the end of the Second World War, when we suddenly decided to go insane. But it's not something that's really difficult to overthink. And the best advice I have for farmers is to just choose one thing and start with that. If it means putting a cover crop in between your cash crops, or bringing animals in and testing them in your system, start something, keep it simple, just start doing something and see what the effects of that are. Also, I see this often, why regenerative, or people who start with regenerative farming fail quickly, is because there's so many things that you can do with regenerative farming that often they tend to just do everything at once, and they don't know what's working or what's not working, and then things can really fall apart. And so my advice is start simple, start small, choose one thing, one or two things, and test them and see how they work, and then start building on top of those small successes as you go along. You don't need a perfect Gabe Brown system from day one. It took him 30 years to get there, so you're definitely not going to have it from day one. So the next piece of advice about creating your regenerative system is to measure, or to trial, measure, and manage your system. It's basic change management. If you're going to start doing something new, you want to see what the effect is of that new thing that you're doing, and then you can really decide whether it's working for you or not. Like I said, there's a bunch of different regenerative practices out there and tools and things like that, and not all of them are fit for every farm situation. So the best is to choose one or two, test them out, choose things that you want to measure. So see what the effect is on soil carbon, for instance, or see what the effect is on your calcium percentage in your soil if you're applying this technique, and then measure it consistently, and then you make an informed decision. Because, yeah, like I said, a lot of farmers I know, they just do something, or they do too many things at once. They don't measure it, and then they say it doesn't work, or nothing works, and then it's often that one thing failed and the four other things worked, but they couldn't distinguish them because they didn't set it up properly and test it. Then this is something that I see all the most successful farmers who are applying regenerative practices well are curious. They're curious about doing things better, and they're often super passionate about farming in a different way. And educating yourself about regenerative farming is the most important thing you can do, in my opinion, as a farmer. You can talk to a lot of experts, and you can get consultants out and things like that. But if you don't make these practices your own, if you don't apply them to where you are in your situation, it's never going to work for you on your farm. You have to adopt these practices. You have to become the expert yourself. That's why I call myself an enthusiast, because I've seen regenerative farming practices work in the environments that I've worked in, and that excites me. But I can't tell you in your environment what works for you. I don't have. You need to be the one who tells you, who decides that. So that's why I rather walk a path with a farmer and help them test some of these practices in their environment and help them develop their knowledge and help them get educated about what works in their environment. Instead of coming in and saying, this is the truth, this thing works and you must adopt it because I'm an expert. No, I'll never say that to a farmer because they usually tell you you're an arrogant asshole and tell you to get lost. And then the last thing is when you're considering regenerative farming, you need to keep in mind it's about the bigger picture. It's a holistic approach to your farm to try and integrate your whole farm, try and integrate all the natural processes that already exist within your farm and get them into a balance. You need to create unity and harmony with nature. The way we farm at the moment is against nature. Everything is aside. We want to kill everything. You've got a pesticide and a herbicide and a fungicide. And we have created a system of farming where we are completely out of touch with nature. And we compartmentalize things and we try and solve one small issue individually in this bigger picture. And a farm system doesn't work like that. The farm is you have to see the bigger picture. You have to see the holistic nature of your farm and how all these systems naturally fit together and flow from one to the next to the next. And if you can start to see your farm as a bigger picture, then you start to really see what it is that you need to do to regenerate that whole. Instead of just focusing on one or two problem areas, you can see what the effect is. For instance, planting cover crops here between rosemary, what the effect is on the whole system instead of just that small effect that you have right there and there. So yeah, that is some practical tips. Summary, I tried to now show you what soil biology is. It's that tiny piece of life that transmutes your soil from being a dead mineral thing into a living, supportive thing. Then some practical tips on what you can do to move towards a regenerative system. And then what is a regenerative system? And keeping in mind that holistic picture, that you should always see your farm as that holistic picture and manage it as such. Okay. Thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was great, and as always, full of some excellent analogies. So I won't repeat them now, but I did have a good giggle. Are there any questions for Daniel? I haven't seen anything come up on we have got some, sorry, my apologies, come up on the chat. Isn't the compounding effect of several interventions what makes it work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So,
and the authors clarified just in terms of where you mentioned that you can start with one small intervention.
So the compounding effect, it makes it, how can I say? If you start with one small intervention, you'll see that something is working there. But once you start to tie multiple interventions together and you start to develop that system, then you get to a case where 1 + 1 becomes 3. So you get exponential results instead of linear results, where single interventions will give you fairly linear results. So just using cover crops, you're definitely going to have more soil moisture. But using cover crops and the microbial inoculant together, you're going to have more soil moisture, you're going to have better physical structure, and you're going to be building carbon 3 times faster than what you would have if you just had cover crops on their own. So that's it works. Just doing one small change works. I've seen it on many conventional farms where just a small change already has a good effect. But if you start to tie them all together, then you start to have exponential effect on your regenerative system. And that's where these miraculous results start coming from. And that's why it's so difficult for scientists, because scientists are often it's very difficult for them to not look at something in these little boxes and reductionist. They've got a very reductionist way of looking at something. So that's difficult for them in complex systems where there's multiple variables that all count together and then start to give exponential effects. One small thing does work, and it does start making a difference.
Thanks, Daniel. We've got another question, whether you've got some manuals, toolboxes, or links in terms of what makes compost or what makes good compost, or for cover crops, biochar, etc. Basically, all the good stuff you spoke about. And if you do have any of these, if you could share them, I'd be very happy to also just include them in the follow-up link. Follow-up email, some links, but if there are any specific manuals or toolboxes that you'd like to speak to.
Yeah, my great teacher is called YouTube. He's got many instructors, and that's my way. I get a lot of not my information, but that's where you get exposed to a lot of different information from a lot of different people. So if you want, I can mention a couple of people. For instance, in composting world, there's Dr. Elaine Ingham and Dr. David Johnson, two, they're leading the popular compost movement, as I call it. They are making composting cool and accessible to the rest of the world. Obviously, there's other scientists who are very smart and study composting, but Dr. David Johnson, for instance, he's in New Mexico State University. He developed my favorite composting system. It's called the Johnson-Su bioreactor, and it's like the lazy man's way of making compost. You fill it up once, and then a year later, you take out your compost, and it's done. And it's the best compost you'll ever see. So you get lots of different styles or techniques to make compost, or even biochar, cover crops. And like I said, it does depend from situation to situation. You have to look at as many different techniques out there as possible, and choose then what works the best, what can work for you, what would be practical in your circumstances. If you've got it's very different if you've got a 0.5 hectare farm versus a 8,000 hectare farm, what kind of things you're going to be doing on those two farms. So yeah, by all means, I can share a bunch of links, but the best is to get out on the internet, super connected, and look at all the things that are available there. Then find someone who really knows something about one of these techniques that you think is interesting, and try and find someone local to you that can actually come out and talk to you and teach you in person, and then take it from there.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Be sure to go and have a look up on Dr. Elaine Ingham and Dave Johnson. I think that was it for the questions. I'm just double checking. It looks like that was it for the questions. Daniel, thanks very much for your time, and thank you everybody for joining us. I will follow up, Daniel and I will follow up with an email with a link to this recording, the slides, and possibly a few links to some YouTube channels that Daniel mentioned. And thanks very much for participating in the final part 3 of our Making Regen Ag a bit more accessible webinar series. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Inga, for hosting. And yeah, hope everyone has a good day further.
Cheers.